Hi, Christina. We are live with
Hi.
this conversation. We were talking off stage for those who are joining us. I know a couple people have shared our show. We were talking in the green room, the live green room, if you want to call it that, about how we want to have this conversation. It's just going to be super casual. Christina and I have talked a lot offline about really difficult subjects. We both have a similar background, and both of us were like, after we watched the show MAID, I think, Christine, you actually watched it first and suggested that I watch it, I think, if I remember right. And then we were like, we need to go live and talk about this because we relate to it. And this isn't going to be an interview. This is us just chatting about our life experience and what the show MAID is. Will you, Christina, kind of give us a brief rundown on what MAID is? What is this? The show MAID that was on Netflix that everyone's talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. The show MAID is based off of a true story, right? The woman who wrote the book first that became a Netflix series is about a woman who was involved with an abusive relationship or a marriage and had a child during that marriage and decided to leave the situation, and just all of her trials and tribulations of trying to regain her independence back, being a single mother, the inequities and the unfairness of the system, and just really trying to rebuild herself again. And so, as you said, Chriselle, my best friend texted me. She said, I saw this series. You've got to watch it, but I want to, preface it, right? You got to be ready because it's very similar to what you went through, but I think you'll really like it. And so it took me a couple weeks to dive into the first episode. Girl, I think I probably watched the whole thing in 3 days. And that's when I had texted you, you got to watch it. But I think I said the same thing, right? You got to be ready for it because it's so real and so raw to what we lived and continue to live, that you really have to be in the right mindset.
I don't think I knew what to expect. And the other thing is I didn't realize it was based on a true story. But what I kept saying, I don't think I realized that until you told me after I finished the series. But what I kept saying is, how did they get it so accurate to the justice system? I kept going, whoever did this knew, they had to have lived it. Because there's no way, we just don't understand the justice system in that capacity until we walk through it. And so once you told me it was based on a true story, and I didn't realize it was based on the novel, there's actually, you call it a novel, right? MAID, the novel based on her life story. I didn't realize that. So then it made sense. Okay, this makes sense.
Okay, is it a novel though? If it's a biographical account? I
don't know.
But it's real, right? It's a true story.
Real.
True story. Yeah.
Yeah, it's based on her real life story, and it makes, after knowing that made sense. Okay, I'm going to say that I actually watched it with my son, who's 15, and he wanted to watch it. He kept saying, Mom, let's watch MAID. Also, again, didn't know what I was watching. And he's old enough to watch and be able to have conversations. But is this something you would let your kids watch, or what? Yours are a little bit younger, I think. So
yeah. So my eldest is 13. So I don't think not just yet, especially because he's my one that suffered the CPTSD. And so and I say suffered as in it's past tense, but it's a continual healing journey, as you know. And he saw the most and was old enough, I think, to recollect the most. And so he went through therapy and all the things. And so I think that it would be a little hard for him to process. But he's very cerebral too and very mature. So anyway, that would be my only hesitation. It's not too graphic, right? It's not extraordinarily graphic, but I think that especially if you've lived it, a lot of flashbacks, right? They don't show, full-on abuse. They've done it very tastefully and yet raw and authentic at the same time.
They showed, I think, the other thing that captured my attention is they showed what emotional abuse looks like, because it's really hard to describe that gaslighting and that scapegoating and that blame. It's really hard to describe. I thought they did a really good job showing what emotional abuse looks like. I was reading an article too just now, and it said that it was a really accurate portrayal of generational trauma and what that could even look like when abuse is involved. And I know one of the things that they showed was her abuser was an alcoholic. And so I had a lot of triggers with that. That was very, very similar to my experience. So me watching it, I think even the first episode, I don't know if I want to use the word trigger, but I just was like jaw dropped. Oh my word, they're telling my story.
Yeah, very, very similar. I think that in my case, it wasn't alcohol. It was, to the nines on the other side of the spectrum, like really extreme in terms of like the drug abuse and whatnot. But I think what they highlight in it is the generational piece. And so a family that aids and abets, right, and maybe the reason for the addictions that surface, right? So it's just passing on down the line. Of course, these are reasons, not excuses.
Yeah.
And I think, like in my case specifically, I know that kept me for a long while, as reasoning as to kind of having, I guess, empathy for the individual, right? But then also becoming the victim of that.
They showed the enabling of generations, how different generations enabled. I thought they very accurately showed how dysfunctional families, even each family will enable abuse and addiction. I could very much relate to some of that. And that's something that's very hard to describe as well. That was fascinating to me that they were able to do that. And then I saw myself in a lot of the enabling and the compassion and that kind of thing with the abuse and also the addiction. I don't know if you saw yourself in any of that. I know that everyone I talk to is basically saying, that's my story. Like,
yeah, I think that there's probably very similar pathways, right, to the evolution of how you end up in a full-on abusive relationship. I don't necessarily think that it goes overnight, right, from daisies to the abuse, right? And so as it evolves, I think that you just get deeper and deeper into it, right? And the abuse heightens, but also the excuses become more relevant to you, and you at least for me, started internalizing the excuses, right, to make sense of my reality. The situation doesn't become crazy, right? You feel like you're crazy.
Yeah. And even those words are used. I think at one point in the movie, her abuser called her crazy or used something like he called her something so that she doubted her own sanity. I remember that point. And I thought, wow, they're really
that girl, right? That girl, I'm smiling. It's not she's smiling, but the blogger, right? Recently, what's her name? Gabby.
Yes. So I was watching MAID, and it was paralleling the story with Gabby, and that was triggering to me as well, because anyone who's watching the police cam. Did you see that?
I did.
Police cam where he helped me describe this. What was your feeling when you saw that?
Well, for me, I was thinking complete manipulator, but he was calm, he was cool, collected, charming, connecting with the police officer, even laughing, while she's, you know, emotionally distressed, right? Which is then expressed as, you know, maybe hysterical in some regard, right? Just completely out of sorts because she's traumatized, right? And yet the abuser is able to hold it all together. But I think somebody who's been in that situation and or is educated can see through the control. I don't really know. I watched it a couple of times, and I'm really not sure if those officers or the one in particular was like attuned to what was really going on.
I feel like there was a part where they doubted him. There was a part where they doubted him, but they didn't go far enough, I don't think. At the same time, this is the hard part. We're adults. And how many times did we make a decision to stay? It's yeah, watching that, everyone who has walked through abuse, I think I was watching conversations online, part of conversations offline. Every one of us were going, we're watching something we know. Like, we know this, we know how this works. And it was infuriating. But I also said, this is horrible to say this is an example of what it looks like. But right before our eyes, when you've walked a certain path and you want to explain it to people, right before our eyes on camera was this person that those of us who have walked through that know. We know that. We know that calm, collected, charming. She's crazy. Look at her. She's out of her mind. Look at her crying and not able to hold a conversation. And I know I have to deal with this. This is the way it is. It was infuriating to watch that. So that paralleled me kind of watching MAID.
Yeah.
And in some ways, Christina, I don't know. I believe, I'm going to get woo-woo here, but I do believe that at some point truth comes out. And in some way, both of these stories are allowing the world to see what emotional abuse looks like. Because we haven't been able to point to anything and say, this is what it looks like. This is how CPTSD is created. This is what trauma looks like. This is how trauma comes to be.
I'm sitting here quiet because I'm like, it's like this divine orchestration, right? Divine timing, where certain things have to come together at the same time in order to highlight things that are otherwise unnoticed and or swept under the rug. Unfortunately, it's an ongoing issue. It's a long-standing issue, probably since the beginning of time of relationships. And there's women all over the world, right, who sadly are, you know, binge watching the Netflix series thinking that's my story.
I think, I don't want to speak for you, but in some ways I speak and I tell my story, one, because I was silenced for so long in my world. You don't talk about this. And I want to be able to not only speak for myself and finally stand up for myself in a way that I really never have. I wasn't even raised to really stand up for myself. But I also want to speak for people who can't speak yet. Like, there's an inner lioness in me that I have my days where I'm like absolutely distraught. And then I have my other days where I can feel this lioness say, you have to speak because there's other women who can't. And bringing to light what the judicial system looks like. How many friends did I have tell me they walk this path and this is what it looks like, and I didn't understand until I started walking it myself. And every step of the way, my jaw is dropping, going, you know what, here's the thing, Christina. I thought the judicial system was there to protect us. I know you have the look. I know.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time and a lot of money fighting for our freedom. I mean, like, you're talking like 6 figures and over 4 years going back and forth in the courts, and then always, or not always, but never knowing, right, which way it was going to pan out. Would they believe me? And my kids were little, so they weren't of an age where they were, asked their opinion. The things that they did come forward with, and CPS was involved, and there was even like marks on them documented, it really didn't like move the needle, which is insane to me. So I don't know what the system is designed to do. Protect and like is probably not. One of the things is not doing very well. And I understand like the safety measures, right? And the layers of discovery and the seeing all sides of the truth. But there's a lot of things I think that they go on too long and unnecessarily because of those quote unquote safety measures. I don't know if it's just a money making engine, because there's a lot of people who make a lot of money off of abuse.
That's an interesting conversation, because something that I was unaware of is that lawyers can draw something out and will draw something out to make more money. I don't know why I assumed everyone would just want to protect the unprotected, the vulnerable. I had no idea that lawyers would want to draw things out so that they can make more money. I didn't know. I didn't know that it would be assumed that possibly both people are lying. And I'm speaking in general here, just from stories I've heard, a little bit my own story. It's like you leave abuse, you take that step to leave, and you're not protected, actually. You're entering into a new level of abuse with the judicial system. And unless you have money to actually protect yourself, this is a whole conversation. I don't even know where to go with this. This has been mind-blowing to me. And again, I've had other friends tell me, this is what I walked through. I spent 6 figures, and I'm going, women don't have 6 figures to spend. And it seems like the judicial system protects the person with the money.
Well, and even with the money, right? In my case, I did have the money, but it's still a risk, right? The money isn't the guarantee that it's still going to go in your favor. And then what happens between that time, right? From when you come forward to the final decision, where the kids, what's going on between today and like, when is the final decision? How is that going to go, right? There's no guarantee. And I had a lot of those fears. I was a public figure. I was, at a big corporation. I was a company spokesperson, right? I was the only person making above the table money for my children. And then, so there was a lot of things, right, that I chose not to blow the whistle on. The drugs in the house, the all sorts of the things, because you're implicated. You're married to this individual. You quote unquote put up with it for so long, right? I could have lost everything. So there are a lot of things that I didn't come forward with. I guess I played it as safe as I could, or I felt like, because it's a gamble, right? And what do you have to lose? Your children in it, right? My first lawyer, speaking of lawyers, I had 2. And my first one was one of those who dragged it out. I don't think always made the best decisions for myself or for my children. which was interesting because it was like, I think the first 3.5 years that I was with that firm. And then something happened to get me to the point of I got to cut it. So I'm going to, re-up. I'm going to find a new person to represent, and I'm going to pay another retainer. I'm going to cut my losses and start all over. But, when I made that switch, I actually hired the most or maybe like close to the most expensive lawyer in all of San Diego. And it's because I wanted to get the job done right and quickly. That was their promise to me after the first consultation. And within 6 months, I had the divorce finalized. And then 6 months later, I had 100% custody, which I could not get in the first 3.5 years of just continuing to spend with this other firm, which wasn't that, the differential in the pricing wasn't that much. So I was spending a lot to be, jerked around, I guess.
I think what MAID accurately portrays is Christina, we come out of this, you go into this abusive relationship, not knowing you're going into an abusive relationship, right? Most of us didn't know we were being abused until maybe middle to the end. Some of us don't know we were ever abused until after we leave, right? And by the time you leave and then you go through the judicial system, you come out like a gangster and should have probably your law degree. I mean, what do you come out absolutely, on the one hand, distraught, but you just went to war in some respect. And the things you learn about the law, because you have to learn it, you don't have a choice. I think that was something that MAID portrayed quite well. I will say at the very end of the story, I was like, okay. The battle wasn't as, because at the end of the story of MAID, he kind of just said, I can't handle this. I'm giving you what you want, kind of thing. And I was like, okay, that's some people's story. That's probably not the majority of how it ends. And what an amazing thing that a lawyer came in and handled her case.
Wasn't that was one of my favorite parts in her relationship with the woman. I forget her name, but the one with the house and all the things that she met through work, and then connected her with that saving grace of a lawyer.
Yeah.
It's so poetic. And it's real. And I think a lot of those things, you look back, right, and how hard the process is, but then looking at the divine intervention of like those blessings that somebody will come along and sprinkle a little something, and it's not, the be all end all, and it's not going to heal you or put an end to it. It's specifically when it comes, but those magical moments. I know there were so many people along my path who helped me, encouraged me. And I mean, just even an uplifting word, those angels that come forward, it's just, I think it keeps you going. Because that's the biggest thing, right? That it's an arduous process, and it takes a lot out of you. And it takes a long time, like physically a long time in the calendar. So it's a marathon, and you need all those little pieces to keep you going. I think that's one of the best things about MAID, really, that it's feeding a lot of people, I think, in their moments of need, so they don't give up.
You're right. You said it's a marathon. And I think I've never run a marathon, but the end is the hardest part. And you just have to keep hanging on. You have to keep hanging on, and you keep going. And I'm talking about like the end is the judicial system. And it feels like, I was talking to someone yesterday, it feels like labor pains, except the end result isn't this baby that you get to hold in your arms. It's like the end result is like, I don't even have words for it, but it still feels like those labor pains of some sort. Christina, there's so many women who are either walking this path currently, have walked this path. We have media coverage now showing what emotional abuse looks like. Like, what do we do? What do we do now? Do we just keep holding these conversations? What are your thoughts?
There is so much work to be done. But yeah, talking about it, normalizing it, bringing it to the surface, being able, I think, to put to bed the shame that comes with all of this, especially for those of us who have been removed from the situation. I think, like, between you and I, right, I'm a little bit further along down the path. And so I feel like it's easier for me. Like, when I was going through it, you wouldn't have heard from me. I didn't tell anybody, my situation, even when it was happening and or when I was going through the divorce process. And so, but I think different women telling their story of where they are and where they've been all along the spectrum, I think helps everyone. And it doesn't help the, other women. I think it helps the support people, the allies, right? And we need to educate the humans, right? Some of our, male friends and family and colleagues can be our best allies to help along the healing process, and then to help ensure, right, that we raise a better generation, that this doesn't continue on. I mean, that was one of the biggest things that drove me to just leave the situation. I looked at my children. I have 2 boys and a girl. Who am I? What would I think if my boys became what their father was, or my daughter, married someone like her dad? Who would be to blame, right? Him or me, who allowed it? So,
raising better generations. James says awareness, raising of emotions and healthy emotions in school, education and relationships is one thing. The other thing that's on my mind is, where are the resources for women who leave? Where are the resources? Like, where can women go? Where can they go and be safe? Once they're out of a shelter, if a shelter exists, because there's not a lot and there's waiting lists. And even after that, where do they go? Where's the furniture to furnish a apartment or a home? Most women leave without any money. Many leave with zero money because the financial abuse that was there. Where's the furniture? How do we furnish a house? Living in San Diego, one of the most expensive areas to live in the entire world. And often the judicial system will tell you can't leave, you have to stay here. How do you support yourself? Those are the questions I'm asking. Where do these resources come from? I don't want any woman to go through what we went through. I want them to be able to leave and have a fully furnished house.
At least, right? Because of all of that stability and taking care of the children. Like, that's the least that they could have, right? Because that's still not the solution to their healing process and their ultimate freedom and independence. It's a big one. It's a big one to unpack. I think we can do like a whole series on it.
Do a whole series, like, the things you realize you need. And I'm a crier, so, and I'm gonna let myself be real. The things you realize you need.
You know what? At the end of the day, because in all transparency, right, I didn't have the money issue, right? But a lot of the things that were the control and the games that were played, I ended up selling my home and moving from that home to a 2-bedroom apartment, right, with 3 kids. I got rid of a lot of my stuff.
Yeah.
And it was a shock to me, a culture shock to me, to have, basically no room to nurture my children. I felt, right, we were living on top of each other. That happened. We were in an apartment for a couple of years. And so I'm not liking it to anything of, not having a place, because that's a whole nother level, or maybe having a place or a room and there's nothing in that room. But I think that holding on to the gift of safety and security and love, like we had love.
Yeah.
In that 2-bedroom apartment, we had love all day, every day. And every time I opened the door, I knew what to expect when I walked into that apartment. There was peace and there was calm, and God was there every single day. At the time, there was hard days though. Like, I took a lot of my blessings for granted. I would curse my life and my choices. Yeah. And, like, I'll be honest, I cursed God. Like I was just so hurt from everything. Right. Not just for me, but for my children. And so, I think holding on to just the security of your life, the fact that you woke up today is a lot, I think, that goes back to just getting through this marathon, which, the labor and the marathon analogies only go so far, because there's an end to it, and how it's going to end, right, with the baby, or you get the finisher medal. There's especially with the marathon, there's a finite time, right, of when you hit the 26, like the pain is going to be over. With this, you don't know how long that marathon is going to be. It could be next month. It could be 3 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. You said the thing about peace and love, and absolutely, like you leave often with nothing. I mean, I think they said it takes often 7 times for a woman to leave an abusive situation, because of the trauma bonding, because of the finances, because of the kids, and even to the point of, if the courts are going to give custody to a parent, an abusive parent, you want to at least stay there to protect as much as you can. All of these conversations, right? But yes, the peace, walking into a home for the first time, when you haven't lived in a place of peace and love for so long, suddenly you know what heaven on earth is, because you walked through hell on earth. And there's no feeling like it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's everything. Life becomes like so simple. Everything is all the other things, all of the, the ambitions that you had, the need for material things and everything else, all those extras, they just kind of disappear. And that's the one thing I think that essentially becomes a gift, right? And it's like, think like something that, that you just, I don't know, I want to say like thank your abuser for, but really it's a new perspective, and gratitude, because of all the things that you had to endure. Like, it just makes life so much sweeter. Like, I don't care, girl. I don't care sitting in my room by myself. Like, Friday night, like I don't go out, my kids are, they're doing whatever they do. I don't like need or want for anything anymore.
You absolutely realize what the most important things on this planet are. And you realize it's not things. Like, you realize what you can live and live without. And I don't know, something about the human spirit is just so powerful. And the things that no longer matter to me, like, you can't hold me hostage with things. Like, you need some things to be comfortable, right? You need food, you need a blanket, you need things like that. But you cannot hold me hostage with things, because things don't matter to me. Like you said, my children are what matter to me. Them being safe is what matter to me. Them having food is what matters to me. I think something that I love more than anything in the entire world is being able to make dinner for them and have dinner with them. Like, to me, that's heaven.
And those are the little things, right, that you would take for granted. Like, I literally, sometimes I think about like people that I know, or like, you know, friendships or whatnot. And I think about people and I'm like, that person's really nice to me. Like, I literally will thank someone for being so nice to me. You know, and those are things that you might just take for granted. You know, that person is always so nice to me. Like, they always say something so encouraging, or what, you know, whatever the case may be. Like, I don't necessarily think, not necessarily, I know that I wasn't that person that would just be mindful of those things before all of this stuff happened to me.
Yeah. What, I love asking these questions, and I'm not interviewing you, so ask me back, please. What is your passion now? Like, what sets your soul on fire, Christina? And I love talking to you about this, because you and I start, like, suddenly we start igniting some kind of flame. We don't know where we're going with it, but what sets your soul on fire?
Gosh, you know, well, you know, I'm a writer. I love to write. So that always gets me going. But one of the new things in my life I'll share as we record this, I think it's November. So since June of this year, my youngest son started playing basketball, like on a team and everything, right? So he never had that experience before. And so getting to watch him, you know, 6 or 7 days a week practicing, and just growing and being proud of himself and excelling is literally like one of my deepest passions, because I can see him enjoying life and doing, you know, what he loves to do, that, you know, God put a little, you know, a little gift in him, and to see that develop right before my eyes, I love every moment of it. And I'm not like all, you know, crazy, you know, sports mom thinking my kid's going to be NBA, or, you know, or this. I just enjoy it for this moment, because my kid thinks at that moment that he can do anything, you know, anything that he wants. And so, yeah, if it's 2 hours, an hour and a half per the day, wherever we have to drive to go and see him do his thing, I'm loving it. That really makes me happy, especially because, you know, bringing it back to like what we came here to talk about today, there was a time when, you know, he probably didn't allow himself to dream like that before, because he was, you know, had been in a whole different reality. And look at him now.
That's amazing. That's okay. There's magic there in being able to dream again. Right?
Are you dreaming, Chriselle? Ooh, I'm gonna ask a question, girl. I'm gonna ask a question.
Ask me a question.
I want to know.
I love you.
You inspire me. I want to know, like, what is your dream right now?
My dream right now is, I have a couple dreams, but I'll say this one. One, I want to see my books hit the shelves. And there's been a lot of hang up, but I'm kind of seeing now why that might be. I thought I would be publishing by now, but I'm not. And there's been hang-ups. And I'm actually looking at situations and going, actually, it wasn't the right time. So I want to see my books hit the shelves. And Christina, I want to keep talking to women who have passion and fire in their souls. Because when women have passion and fire in their souls, they light other women on fire. And their stories bring life and light. I'll never forget the first time I talked to you. The very first time. Do you remember this? Like, I thought I was
at least now.
Has it been?
It has been.
Has it been longer than I'm thinking?
It's definitely more than 2 years ago. Yeah. I feel like.
Oh my word. Okay. That is, time flies.
I think, or maybe I'm old too. Maybe I'm putting too much on it, girl. I'm putting too much on it. I don't know.
We went deep real fast. So I remember the first time I contacted you, I think it was after I think we interviewed you on either my show or my show with Tim. I don't remember, but I was like, oh, I want to talk to her. I want to get to know her. But I came to you for branding, actually, and we ended up talking about everything else. And you started speaking life to me. And I was like, that was no branding. That was like no branding experience I had ever had in my life, because you started speaking life and vision over me. And that's what I want to see women do. I want to see more of that, because you helped me believe in myself. Huh?
Things just happen. Well, you bring it out of people. So it's like, the world needs more of you to have those conversations, to bring people to that point of like, where's the entry of like, when we're talking about, marketing, right? Or building a brand or logo, or whatever it is, like all like the human things. And then all of a sudden the conversation turns to, no, this is actually really what you were supposed to be talking about. And God will just put the right people at the right time right in front of your lap to have that conversation, to give you that message. Right. And, I can't wait to see more of your shows, girl. Because you do have that gift about you. You have a story yourself, but you also have that gift to, I guess, bring out the story in others, like that, the safe space. It's that connection, right? Because you just gonna go around, at least me, go around just telling any old body, that called me for a branding conversation about, real life things.
Yeah, that was, you also believe in people. And when you believe in people, are given the opportunity to start believing in themselves. It's like the scales are shed off your eyes, right? That metaphor of when you start speaking life and you start believing in people, when you can look into a woman's eyes and see them and tell them who they are and what they're capable of, the scales start shedding and we start thinking like, oh, maybe I am that. Maybe I can be that. Maybe I can do that. That's what lights my passion. That's what sets me on fire. All of that, Christina.
I love it. We need more of that. We need more of that. So
we do.
Yeah.
Christina, I want to have more of these conversations with you. So let's do it.
We're all just staring at each other. Let's do it, girl.
Let's do this. We just stare because we're having a whole life. Let's do this. Let's have more conversations. Let's keep talking. Let's keep doing this.
I would love it. Thank you for having me today and allowing us to chit chat about things. MAID was such an amazing program, and this conversation was just, I think it was just perfect because you and I both know it well, for better or for worse.
Absolutely.
But you know what, is not the series just beautiful? Like her strength, her courage, and her ultimate success. And sometimes when you look at your own life, you don't realize like just how beautiful and courageous and successful it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, if anyone's watching out there, like your life is just as beautiful and poetic as this series, I think. I know.
Absolutely. And anyone who watches this, who hasn't walked this path, watching MAID, just so you are aware of what emotional abuse looks like, what this looks like, the more people who are aware, the safer, I'm speaking specifically to women, the safer women become. And I do realize men are abused, but my heart, because of my path and my voice, is for specifically women. So my ask for any audience and for allies is to watch MAID, read the story, gain knowledge so you're more aware, because it just makes the world around all of us more safe, and safer for our children too. So Christina, I'm going to sign us out. Thank you for this conversation. I adore you, and we'll do more.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.